Welcome to this presentation to one of the more fascinating grasses found not only on golf courses but in the world. Poa annua, or as its common name here in the United States is annual bluegrass, or sometimes it's just referred to as poa. Traditionally, Poa annua is considered a weed. No one ever established it from seed as a desirable turf grass. It invades all turf grasses and often appears initially as yellow patches of turf, which is shown here. Poa annua produces a profuse amount of seed during the spring and into the early summer. As you can see here by some of these numbers, which were actually done from a study in Australia, it's extremely profuse. It's rather amazing that Poa annua can be mowed at less than 1/8 of an inch and still throw up a seed head. I found this photograph in an article that must be 50 or 60 years old. And as you can see, in this instance, the golf course is trying to get rid of Poa annua. So, if Poa annua is a weed, why are we covering it here in the turfgrass module? Because Poa annua is well adapted to the golf course conditions. Low mowing heights, the fertilization that's applied, compacted soil conditions, and supplemental irrigation. It does form a beautiful turf when well maintained. If Poa annua is as aggressive as it is and is a weed, oftentimes it's so difficult to control and to prevent from taking over the golf course, whether it be the tees, fairways, or roughs. Many golf courses live with it, especially courses in the northern United States, like Oakmont Country Club, shown here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As a turfgrass species, a desirable one, annual bluegrass is adapted to the northern United States. Poa annua is native to Europe. A few of the common names that annual bluegrass goes by around the world include annual meadowgrass and wintergrass. Either as a weed or as a turfgrass species, it is found at some point on all golf courses. As previously mentioned, we will look at this grass as a desirable turfgrass species in this presentation. Poa annua is an extremely competitive grass species that colonizes tees, greens, and fairways, which can be comprised of creeping bentgrass or Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, or on the links courses, grasses like fine fescue. In this photograph, the light green patches are Poa annua, which is invading this fine fescue green. For your information, the crew member here is riding a speed roller that is often used on greens to make them smoother and increase green speed. We will study rolling in a later module. Poa annua first appears on putting greens as small yellow patches, which is shown here. These patches can be rather profuse. Interestingly, a number of people think that they come in from ball marks and small openings in the turf. Actually, that is true to some extent, but Poa annua really does not need a small disturbance or small area to invade. It can actually push its way through a fairly dense turf. There are two general types of Poa annua. The annual type shown here, which is a prolific seed producer that tillers and spreads to a limited degree and has a relatively shallow root system, is usually the first one to appear in a turf or golf course turf situation. The seed of the annual type germinates, for example on a putting green, and pushes its way up through the creeping bent grass cover and appears as these small spots. As Poa annua colonizes the greens, the patches become larger and the perennial types, shown here, within these patches begin to express themselves. This type of Poa annua, this perennial type, is associated with fewer seed heads, more tillering, spreading by short stolons, and maybe have a little deeper root system, can become and predominate especially on putting greens. In this form, the perennial type, it becomes very difficult to get Poa annua removed from a putting green. Here's a picture where the green, tee, fairway, and rough are Poa annua. This is a golf course in Portugal. You may want to note too, given the shaded conditions, that Poa annua has excellent shade tolerance. Here is a golf course in Cleveland, Ohio, where the tees, greens, and fairways are predominantly Poa annua, and the roughs are a mix of Kentucky bluegrass and Poa annua. The disadvantage of managing Poa annua as a desirable turf, besides its profuse seed head production, is its susceptibility to environmental stresses. This Poa annua green has suffered ice injury, which is one of the components of winter injury. This picture was taken in the Detroit area a few years ago. Not only is Poa annua susceptible to winter injury, but it is also susceptible to high temperatures and moisture stress during the summertime. This picture was taken from a golf course in Cincinnati, Ohio a few years ago. Maintaining Poa annua greens is similar in many ways to maintaining creeping bentgrass. Poa annua is adapted to low mowing heights, which makes it extremely competitive against the other cool season turf grasses. In general, the overall management of Poa annua turf is quite similar to that of creeping bentgrass. This concludes this brief overview of Poa annua as a desirable turfgrass species. For your information, this is the 7th hole at Pebble Beach Golf Club, and the greens there are 100% annual bluegrass.